Hello, everyone. This is Duke Sayer, and this is the first episode of Man Club. So, if you haven't heard of Man Club and you're wondering what the hell is Man Club, other than a catchy name, it is a group for men to come together, be in their truth, be conscious, and also do some cool shit. And the Man Club podcast is basically when we first did the first Man Club meeting, everyone was like, "Dude, this needs to be recorded. This needs to be out there." And yes, we're going to record some of the things we do, but also we're going to have really fucking cool guests who you as men want to listen to, whether it's business, whether it's relationship stuff, everything from how to have more charisma, how to style yourself better, fast track stuff from getting fit, whatever it might be. And I thought for the first episode, because this is hot off the press, this is just real, and this is how it's going down, I have got tribe building expert Dan Rice. Dan?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me, Duke.
Welcome to the show. Yeah, what I thought would be really cool, because this, as I said, is just hot off the press, just been open and honest with what's going on. I thought, let me record the first episode with Dan, because what he is an expert in is exactly what I want to do and what I'm doing with Man Club. And we're literally just going to go through Man Club and my aim for Man Club and what it's about and what we want to do, what we want to achieve, the people we want to hit. And Dan is going to take me through that process just as if it was your business. So I thought that would be the best way for him to showcase his expertise. You can learn a shit ton and apply it to your business, apply it to your life, your Facebook group, your tribe, wherever it might be. And we'll go from there. So Dan, first of all, do you want to just elaborate, other than you build tribes, just share a little bit, like, what is it you do in a nutshell?
Well, in a nutshell, I'm basically all about building tribes around individuals. So the idea is that they're going to be fun to lead for the actual individual themselves, but they're going to add value on a regular basis to the people who are members. But as a result of those two things, then it's going to create opportunities within that group. So it might not just be it might be for people interacting within the group, or it might be for the moderation team. It might even be for the members, but it's going to create an opportunity to do something bigger and better than an individual can do by themselves. So the idea is pulling those three things together, and it's predominantly around Facebook groups that I'm operating at the moment.
Awesome. And how did you get to this point, Dan? Like, what's been your journey? Feel free to give us the pitfalls, the highs, the lows, or maybe you haven't got any and it's just been a plain sailing life. Who knows? But yeah, just how did you get to this point where you're like, this is my thing?
God, it depends on how far back you would want to go. I mean,
hey, look, start from birth. If it's applicable and it will inspire, go for it.
I was born completely deaf. Until about 5 years old, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And they thought that a couple of doctors actually thought I was autistic, because I just wouldn't actually sort of engage with anyone, or wouldn't pay attention to anything. And so I actually went through a big period in my childhood, which was all about catching up to be average and having to work really, really hard to be average. I mean, to give you a bit of an indication, my dad died when I was something like 11 or so. And I don't remember him at all, because I hadn't caught up by that point to sort of really be able to know what was going on. So I've gone from a point of where I was at that point and being told, oh, you're not going to go, my parents were told you wouldn't go to normal school. You're going to need adult care, all this kind of things and frankly, it's a bit of a miracle that I can talk at all, to getting to this point today where I've jumped through quite a few big and decent career roles, but then I've actually gone on to running my own business, which is all about personal connections and building communities and things. So it's almost about the polar opposite of where they sort of thought I would be. I'm all about sort of building.
And were you told that you'd have, you'd need care because they thought you were autistic, or because they were like saying you're so deaf and so struggling and connecting with people, you're not going to be able to get by? Like, what was the reason?
They just really didn't think I was going to be able to look after myself, that I was going to take an extreme amount of care through childhood and then it would carry on that way. But between my mum's a nurse, and so, was a nurse, and so between her and between the special needs teachers at the school, they actually managed to get me to a point where I caught up. And so that was no longer needed by about, I think it was early secondary school, sort of considered, in the average sort of flow of things. And so, whilst it was a tough start and it's been a hard work to get to average, it kind of, it feels like it's kind of got there. It got to a point where I could build on that and do something. And so it's a little bit ironic that now I'm going into the personal connections and things like this, because obviously that was what I struggled with so much. And that's why they thought I was going to really struggle, because I wouldn't be able to really be connecting with people.
Awesome. I think, for you guys listening, you're going to see this throughout the Man Club podcast, but it is fascinating how often the thing that we're oppressed with most, whether it's a certain experience or a certain emotion or a certain life situation, like with Dan, is often the thing that ultimately, when we're on purpose, is expressed in the opposing kind of side. So to me, Dan, it sounds like you're fucking bang on purpose. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and even when I for some reason got it into my head that when I got out of education, that the first thing I had to do was get into sales, because I thought, well, that's how all successful business people get into it. And so I ended up working for an IT company doing charity and membership organizations. It was sort of like the poison chalice, like, oh, this is going to be the really difficult thing that you're not going to be able to sell to these people. But we didn't even have a product. And so we went out and sold, and we did over 200,000. Well, I did over 200,000 pounds in profit to them in a year, which was seen as an outstanding result in the company. And so you put that together with, my belief that was how I was going to get a stepping stone into going into my business career. And actually what served me better in that time was the fact that the way I sold was to advise them on their strategy rather than actually selling them the product that we were talking about.
Yeah.
So I would go in and tell them how to structure their membership and how to engage with their members and grow their memberships. And that is what's obviously carried on into what I'm doing now. And so that was the very early stages of me getting to that point. I mean, yes, it was strange because it went from a point where we sort of had an idea for the product. We had good relationship with Microsoft. And so we ended up just building on top of a Microsoft platform. And then it was because you had that, and because I spoke to them about their strategy and how they would manage their relationships so well, we actually could design the product around what I'd talked to them about.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we ended up doing whole things like how to manage their training programs, how to do things like event management and all these kind of things, which Microsoft, it hadn't even occurred to them to put into their software. So so it was really good to get a big role on that. So,
and how long ago was that, Dan?
That was I started working for that company about 5 years ago. So in total, I've got 6 years of experience in working with charity and membership organisations.
And what's happened since that time then? How have things progressed since kind of realizing that, that's how you sold best, and just kind of advising people and showing them how they could do things better from that point 5-6 years ago to now? What's been the progression? What's some of the new things that come in? What's some of the things you realized? And has there been an increase if you realize I'm like, shit, actually, I am freaking good at this? Or, you know what I mean? Like, was it like an aha moment? You realize, God, no one else is doing this, and they should be, Yeah,
well, there was a company who had been struggling to get a community engagement manager for about 6 to 9 months. And I met them at an event, and they hired me the next week to go in and to manage their community.
Yeah.
And eventually I ended up training the team that would then replace me.
Yeah.
But they're a record-breaking Kickstarter project. And so for them to say, well, we're this good at creating communities, but we need your advice on how to create community, how to make it into a real community. That was obviously massive kudos to say, well, actually, you really do know your stuff about this.
Yeah.
We got it that quickly that we got it when we met you briefly at an event. And that was enough for us to take you. And so, so that was obviously very positive set of kudos to say, you really do know what you're on about.
And now what you do now, Dan, you say obviously you may do Facebook groups. Many people listening will be a part of a Facebook group or have their own Facebook group. Why Facebook groups? Why is it you're so passionate about Facebook groups over, should we say, LinkedIn groups, or I'm not going to say Google circles, don't worry, but any other kind of avenue or platform, or even forums? Obviously some forums are still quite hot, but it's difficult to start a new one. Why Facebook groups are kind of like your baby that you're like, oh, this is the shizzle? The
reason that Facebook groups are so much better than the others, in my experience, is because they are doing everything right to make them good. So they tend to be favoring them in ways that I think they notice a bit more than people give them credit for.
Yeah.
They basically done things like everyone gets a notification when you write to them. Now, if you look at that in comparison to something like LinkedIn,
Yeah.
You can write 100 times in a LinkedIn group and nobody pay attention.
Yeah.
You'd be hard pushed to do that in a Facebook group. It would be a challenge for nobody to like or interact or engage with your posts in that way. It doesn't take a lot of people to make a Facebook group successful. And I frequently argue that if you've got 5 people, then you can make it happen from that.
So let's why don't we guys just give some feedback. We haven't really like planned this at all, so bear with us. So Dan, let's start this then. So here I am. I'm Man Club. Should I just tell you a bit about what I do, what I aim to do, and then you want to like kind of question me as if I was a client, and people kind of listening can kind of follow along?
Yeah, we can, and then we can dig into what we would do in terms of looking at that and how you would get started.
All right, sounds epic. So this is for you guys listening as well, Man Club, basically, Dan. So it's a platform for men to become more conscious, to become more self-aware, to understand why things are happening in their life, why they're unraveling for them. Like, for example, you as a child, those things, they happen for you because ultimately you were supposed to get to this point where you've overcome that, and now you're freaking expressing in such an amazing way that you're better than people because of what you've been through. And that is the conscious aspect of Man Club, to show people, okay, if a woman's showing up batshit crazy, relationship after relationship after relationship after relationship, it's not that women are batshit crazy. There's something in you that, you need to look at. So that's the kind of self-awareness and conscious aspect of Man Club. And then the other part of Man Club is that men, where society is at the moment, a lot of men are emasculated. A lot of men are approval seeking. They don't know, how to express their emotions. But at the same time, if they man up and quote unquote, then people start calling them chauvinistic and all this kind of stuff. And then the other aspect of Man Club is that, a lot of men just, since they left Scouts or since they hung out at their mate's house when they were a kid or whatever else, anything from camping to base jumping to flying a helicopter to going kayaking to going snowboarding, whatever. We just don't do it enough, Dan. And I'm sure, yourself and anyone listening who's a business owner, who's an entrepreneur. I know myself, once I stopped working in events where I got to go abroad quite a lot, I ended up just sitting behind my laptop and not really enjoying myself a lot. So, Man Club is about that as well, and just really giving guys a platform just to do the cool shit that they don't really take time out to plan themselves. So that's Man Club in its essence. There's obviously extra aspects, people like yourself helping with business, dating experts, charisma experts, style experts, all this kind of other events going on throughout the year. But the main crux of Man Club is getting more providing a platform to be in your truth when women aren't around, and just really being honest with yourself and opening yourself up, being more self-aware, and doing it while doing cool shit. So yeah, that's Man Club, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 key things that I pick out from that is that the elements that you want to work on are being conscious of yourself and your relationships. Yeah. The second is that you want to have a safe space where people can actually be honest about what they're thinking and how they're sort of reacting to things. And then the third is the element of challenge, doing something that is different in your life, which is obviously, it feeds into the different ways that people interact with each other, and is going to be a good core for the basis of a group.
Okay, cool.
It basically means that the way that you're approaching it, and the way that you've approached conversations with me anyway, is that you are very honest and you are conscious of yourself. And so that is going to reflect in how other people are going to engage with you. It's in engaging people in those kind of conversations. The emphasis is on getting them to open up in a way and to feel safe to open up.
Yeah.
So you've got to, when you're looking at how you're going to set up the group and how you're going to manage it, it's going to be really around protecting that right to be yourself.
Yeah.
Obviously there's, I don't know how much of a structure you're going to build around that, but that is obviously the basis and the core of it. So when you then combine that with the kind of things like if you're doing events or taking people bungee jumping or something like that, and that's obviously going to appeal to people because they're going to think, right, well, this is how, I'm safe in this group to be me, and let's go and have some fun and do something exciting or challenge myself in this way. It's kind of like, get safe, get comfortable, and then we're going to push you up, onwards and upwards to to improve yourself and do this better and do that better. So there's definitely a real good core for the group there.
I like that angle. I like that angle from kind of the safe space thing to once you be yourself and feeling safe, then you can push yourself more. I like that kind of spin. I like that. So Dan, you asked me the questions. I know this wasn't really planned, but you asked me the questions. What would you ask me next? Would you ask me then, what kind of platforms did I have in mind? Like what would be next?
In terms of what I would ask next is how well do you know people who you are going to be targeting for this? Because you should be able to, you should be able to outline 5 people who you think are really going to be the core of this group right now. The biggest mistake that people say when they come to me is, well, if I can do it with 5, then I can do it with 20. Yeah. And that's a complete bullshit.
When they say that, what do they mean?
They think that, I want to have the biggest group possible and want to get the most amount of people to like this group, then I can obviously go for 20 people. Yeah. What happens then is you have too many differences between these people and you can't make it ideal for anyone. Yeah. Whereas if you try and map between the 5 people and find the area that's going to be ideal for them, then what naturally happens is that those people will then bring in the people who are most like them. Yeah. Do the same, and they will do the same. And what you find is actually you've got a community that is built on a culture that actually matters to the people. Yeah. And it's called the A-player strategy is what I call it. It's basically about finding those people, and then you almost sort of coax them into acting in the way that you want them to, which is just ever so slightly different to where they are now. Because that is obviously going to help you then to promote the group and to get it out there. Because these people are saying, if you've got, say, in terms of this group, there's a few different areas where you could have the key people. You could have a real adventure junkie who would actually be a really good person to have as a core member in this group, because they're going to then bring that side out of everyone else. Yeah. I would want these people they don't have to be everything, but they have to be really good at something. Yeah. So if they're really good if you had that person who was a really good adventure junkie, then it would be a good person to have in this group, even if they weren't so good at the other bits.
So you're not talking metaphorically of people on Facebook. You're talking people you personally know, as getting them in the first kind of echelons of the core of the group to begin with. You mean?
Yes, I'm talking about that. Yeah, these are the actual people,
real life people.
Yeah, and what will happen is over time these 5 people will change, but you will always have a record of who these 5 people are. Yeah, and the idea is that you know them as well as possible, so that you know how to best serve them.
And this is this. So you're saying this isn't. Because I could pick, like, for example, just off the top of my head, 5 people in my own mind where I'm like, these are the core of the kind of guys I want around in Man Club. It's not that. It's more of the extremities of across those 5 people. Like you're saying, an adventure junkie, maybe someone who's like completely open, honest, speaking from his heart, and then someone who, is a relationship expert. So you're just like, you're talking more of you want to spread across those 5 people rather than a core group, which is reflected in 5 people, right?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if you've got a few elements, then you want somebody who is brilliant at each of those elements. Yeah, you probably want the other 2 to be a bit of a mix between the areas. That would probably be the absolute ideal world. 5 people. Yeah. What typically happens is that if you've got, say, the 3 ideas, it's quite common to have the 3 ideas that you're basing a group on. Yeah. Usually, be able to do 2 very well, and there will be a weak element. Yeah. That weak element will be in you. Will be in the leader, and so it's not so much of a problem when that happens. Yeah. The problem occurs is if it was your weakness, and then you didn't have the people who could come in and fill in those gaps. Then you've got to kind of think, well, how am I going to make that into one of our strengths in the group? Yeah. Probably going to have to find someone who can fill in that gap. Your group is going to take a very different direction to where you've planned it. If you weren't adventurous and you didn't get somebody adventurous into your group, then the group isn't going to be adventurous. It doesn't matter. Like you're going to be trying to force it in and make it happen, and it's not going to happen. Somebody there.
No, it makes 100% sense. No, awesome. I love that. And if it was like if someone had a business group or a relationship group or a health group, let's say a health group, that would be interesting because I know a lot of guys are into health and fitness. Maybe PTs listens to this. Like for example, in a 5 cross spread or maybe a PT group, how might that look?
Okay, this is one that I actually get asked quite a bit, because of a couple of groups that I'm in. Basically, people seem to think very insularly about this. They think, oh, surely if I'm inviting other people in and I'm getting people in, they're only going to be my competitors. Yeah. So the typical way that you look at that is if you are if you are a specialist in, say, in personal training, then there's going to be an area of personal training that you're going to be particularly specialist on.
Yeah.
You're also going to have outlying areas, which are sort of your second and third kind of things. If you know your industry well enough, you will know other people who can be your allies, or who are your allies, who are going to be well placed to be on your team.
Yeah.
So provided that you haven't made your group all about your brand and that's it, then what will happen is they will see that you are creating something good, and you should be able to convince them quite easily to get involved, because it will add value to you and it will add value to them.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the groups that I'm helping sort of admin and moderate, you could say that the people whose groups they are direct competitors.
Yeah.
And I've just gotten involved, and actually both sides have come out of it much better.
Yeah.
So what I would say with a personal trainer rather, is that you should look at the people who are on the outliers of where you are. So I would look at things like nutritionists, even things like people's mentality and how they get into things, because they're going to need those areas to achieve the goals that you're kind of getting them to achieve. So you're not going to be a specialist on all of those three things.
Nice.
You're going to be a specialist on one of them, and then the other things are going to be feeding into it. So all you need to do is you need to find the people who they might look like your competition. But if you're worried about that, then the kind of thing you need to do is look at people in other geographies, look at people who are serving a similar audience, but in a very different way. So when you're kind of saying, well, this is my approach A, and this is their approach B, we're kind of bringing both to the community, and you can look at it in a different way. So that's another approach to how you can look at these people. They don't necessarily have to be people who are obviously direct competitors, which is what people worry about when I say you've got to bring in 5 people who are going to do this.
Yeah, definitely. So next thing then, Dan, so I don't know if this is the next thing. So, I kind of had this vision of membership site and all this kind of content that was just laid on for people, and monthly updates and all that kind of stuff. How do you start mapping that out to make, I was kind of looking at what you said at the beginning, the kind of the contest aspect, the safe space aspect, the challenge aspect. So would I be right then in thinking, okay, I should map out my membership site of, okay, let me put the dating stuff and the relationship stuff and the self-awareness and spiritual stuff and the consciousness, the safe space stuff. It can be a bit more personal development about truth and being true to yourself, and the challenge stuff. I can just have loads of cool shit basically that goes under that. Is that a good way then of mapping out your membership site, or maybe thinking about your product releases? Or is it again thinking about the kind of the 5 people and adhering to what they want?
It's better to do it based on what the 5 people want, but I also understand that the other people have your own business goals and your own ways around it.
Yeah.
What I would do is, depending on how complex you go with it, my own content plan is insanely complex.
Yeah.
But you can do it even on the basis of, right, well, I want to plan what I'm going to be doing on a sort of a monthly theme, say, for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
And then from there, know what I'm going to talk about this month and next month.
Yeah.
And then you can go more granular and say what I'm going to talk about this week and next week.
Yeah.
Because you've got that basis, that platform to be working from, you always know where you're working towards.
Yeah.
And because if you knew that, say, in the summer you were going to take everyone away on an adventure holiday or whatever, then you would know that there's going to be a time that you're going to need to sell those tickets for that to happen.
Yeah.
So you then work backwards and say, right, well, 6 months in advance, say, I've got to get everyone thinking about what adventure they're going to do in the summer.
Yeah.
And because you can then build that back, then you've got a bit of a structure that you can use to build your community around. Yeah. So then you know that you've got to have your right A player talking at that point. It's not going to be, if they're about to have their first kid that time, and that's when you planned it to be the adventure month, then you've got to find someone else.
Yeah.
You can't expect everyone to be available to fit into your schedule. Yeah. So you've got to make it happen that's where you've got to sort of take into account these people's lives and how they're operating and things. Because you're going to need that adventure guy to help you sell that adventure trip. Even if he's got a competing trip, you're going to need him to get that sense of adventure going in the group. So it's important to get these allies and to get them right.
Yeah. And what there's something like this, Man Club, Dan. I've got another group which is just on self-awareness. And that's pretty, honestly, Dan, That's pretty straightforward because, it's just kind of a free group that whenever I speak, I just kind of say to people, hey, go and check it out. It's all good. Self-awareness and energy with Duke. So, it's just kind of, it does its thing, mulls over. I make an offering every now and then. It's not really as complex a kind of plan as what maybe Man Club needs, right? Do you recommend, sticking to like 3 or 5 or however many topics per year and you circulate them? Because let's just say a Man Club, you got the adventure stuff, you got relationship stuff, you got some business stuff, you got some more how you show up stuff, let's say styling and charisma, you've even like training, things like that. So let's just say there's 6 topics just there, right?
Yeah.
Would you recommend then you kind of split it up so that 8 weeks, maybe even individually or grouped together in 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, whatever, like those 8 weeks per year is on that specific topic? Or, or do you wait to see what response you've got after 6 months and then hit those other ones more? Like, what's kind of like a good, for anyone who's got their group, what's a good way of starting to map out their calendar? You said yours is super complex. Like how complex can it get? And why is yours so complex? What's the reason for that? Is it because you've got so many topics or because you're super detailed? Or what's the reason?
Okay, there's a lot of ways that you can look at that. So in terms of why mine's so complex is because I am testing probably 100 of things at any one time.
Okay.
And it doesn't really look like that at all. It just kind of looks like I've just posted something that I've thought of on a whim. And it's nothing like that at all. It's so planned, and it's kind of like, well, we're testing whether people like this more or use the different interactions, or whether people respond in a certain way to certain images and things like this.
Yeah.
So we're always testing something or other. Whether it's obvious or not is another question. And so that's why mine's got quite complex, because it's kind of like, it's based around, it depends on the different groups, but I've got quite a few different groups that I'm sort of piloting and running around with between me and clients. And so it's kind of like how I control all of those different things to make sure that the themes are running.
Yeah.
And so I've got my core themes that I'm running across, which probably wouldn't make sense in individuality to my own Facebook group.
Yeah.
But in terms of overall, they are establishing me as my point of expertise and getting me to the point where I want to be.
Yeah.
And so it's then, so I've got that over 12 months, and then I've got that for each individual group. And even some where I've not got any sort of direct involvement, I've actually got strategies for how I'm actually managing my persona in the group. Because if you want to be a good leader, then you've got to be a good follower. And I kind of feel that is part of my learning process, is to see how I get on and interact with people who I've got no influence over, and I've got no sort of guidance or ideas to put across to. So it's kind of like...
What do you mean by that, Dan? You mean just people who've ended up in the group who just aren't anything like you, and you're like, how do I engage them?
That's the reason why it's interesting. But what I mean is, in other people's groups that I've got no real involvement with.
Oh, I see what I mean, yeah.
And so the reason that it's worth learning from and trying to interact with these people is obviously because then you can pick up when somebody seemingly random comes into your group and you don't really understand why or how to interact with them. Then you've got to, you can't just leave them.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of figure out what you're going to do. And so that's why it gets quite complex, because it's kind of making sure that everything sort of is moving towards the one direction.
Yeah.
Because what I would say is that is probably too complex for most people's needs. What I would say is I would carry out a series of tests and experiments to see what it is that your audience engages with. You want to see what people interact with, but you want to see what people talk to you about. Now, one mistake that people often make is if they don't get a comment or a like on a piece of content on the page, or on the group rather, then they think that it's not been a success. But I would say probably about a quarter of my interactions on the groups that are worst for this, I get pages where about a quarter of the interaction comes directly to personal message. They will befriend me and then only speak to me personally. They won't actually respond to me.
I've got to learn this a lot, even from Facebook lives and things on my personal profile. I kind of find after 4 or 5 videos, someone will then get in contact by private message, be like, "Oh my god, that blew the doors off," and I'm like, "Geez, So,
yeah, exactly." And they won't even like the video in most cases. They'll just have come straight to you and just be like, "Wow," and explain to you what you've been talking. I had I think it was day before yesterday, and tell me about a video that I did. I think it must have been about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like I haven't even promoted that for a long time. So you know that people are obviously following you for a long time, and they've obviously tried something, and then they come back to you and say, "Oh, this has really worked for me." And it can seem like common sense to you, but it can be invaluable to them.
This has been Duke Sayer. That was the Man Club podcast. That was the first episode, part 1 with Dan Rice on building tribes and building a successful Facebook group. Please do head over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, let other people know what you got from this. Let us know what you got from this. Please contact us on Facebook, social media, interact, comment. You know I love hearing from you guys. Of course, join the Facebook group if you haven't already. And look out for the second part where Dan will be going in deeper into the avatars, into how to keep that group buoyant, how to use those A players and B players and C players, and how to actually keep your tribe building and growing for a long-term success ultimately. So look forward to seeing you then. It will be released tomorrow, and I'll catch you guys on the other side.